Thank you. So I'm Parker Nancollas. I am the FinOps practice lead at SoftwareOne, which SoftwareOne does a lot of things, but they're a global service provider, IT and cloud services. One of those services is FinOps. You might have seen at the keynote, I just joined the FinOps Foundation's Technical Advisory Council, so super excited about that. I talked to a lot of organizations, a lot of different FinOps teams at different maturity levels as a consultant. And one of the common questions that I get, so organizations, we work a lot with organizations that are just starting or kind of in the earlier stages. We work with more advanced ones as well. But the companies who are kind of in that early stage, at the beginning, they're doing things like, it might be the first time they've ever bought a savings plan. They might be looking at idle resources and turning them off and saving a ton of money. It's really exciting at the beginning. Once that low-hanging fruit is done, I often get the question that is, what next? Like, all the easy stuff we think we've done, so what should we start focusing on now? And there's a lot that you can do there. I'm not gonna get into all of those things. There's one that I think gets overlooked all the time, like I would say almost always, that I think is one of the biggest sources of additional savings, and that's what I want to talk about today. So, talking about automating workflows. This is a kind of a concept I've been thinking about for a while, but when it comes to FinOps workflows, anything we do in FinOps, we can consider a workflow, right? So whether that's, hey, I noticed that there's this spend that could be covered by a reservation and it's not, and then going through to where then it is covered. If it's something where this is not the right size of resource for this, and then we get it to a better size. If it's collecting forecast data and then presenting that to executives, it could be tagging resources, cost allocation. All of these are workflows that we do in FinOps. And what I've seen is the way different FinOps teams are going about those workflows fit generally into one of these three categories. So you have and I call them layers. This is just might be a dumb concept. This is something just the way I've been thinking about it. So you have the automation layer, which is the workflow's automated, right? So whatever that means, when there's an issue, when there's something that's in an unideal state, it gets identified automatically and action automatically gets taken to correct it, and it's done. Not everything can be automated, or sometimes it takes time, it's hard, you get to that over time. So the next layer is the process layer. So this is where maybe the whole thing's not automated, maybe pieces are, but this is where organizations have an established process. So we're looking for something. We know that there's this unideal state that does or could exist, and we're looking for it. And when it happens, we know what to do to address it to some extent. We at least know who to reach out to. And we maybe know what some of the potential options are, but it's not automated. The last one, I call the chaos layer. So this is where we've got nothing. So something happens, we're made aware of it, and we say, uh-oh, and we go figure it out. As the graph shows, the bubbles represent a couple things, both the time that it takes to address this unideal state, depending on which layer you're in, as well as the potential waste. So the interesting thing is when organizations ask that question, hey, I've done the low-hanging fruit, what next? They're often thinking, like, I've optimized compute, now should I go look at database, should I go look at storage? Or I've done all of that, now what do I look at? Do I start looking at PaaS, SaaS, like that's often what they're thinking. What they're not often thinking is, how do I shorten the time between the unideal state and the resolution? And there's a ton of savings to be had there. So I'll get into some examples in a few slides, but that's just to, I guess, keep that in mind, because we're gonna go through some examples that fit within these layers. So when it comes to actually then designing a workflow, again, anything that we do in FinOps can be a workflow. There's 5 key elements that we think of as a starting point. So these are the 5 key things to define, to use as the building blocks, we'll say, of your workflow. So number 1, a trigger. There needs to be something that lets you know a change needs to happen. Next, there's an action, and that is sometimes a single action that, hey, we know that when this happens, what we need to happen is this other thing. Or it could be, there's a few potential actions that could happen, or it could even be we might somewhat know what the action is, but it's on a case-by-case basis, and that's not completely defined for a specific workflow. But based on the trigger, based on then the actions, we can define who the audience is. So based on the actions that need to be taken, who owns that, who's the one that actually should go make that change. And so we define the audience. We decide what parts of it, if any, can be automated. What level of automation can we introduce? That's a common one there, and a common one that organizations are more comfortable with at a starting point is just even automating the notification, and then manual action, but automated notification, and then the mechanism. So how will we actually go about doing this? So I'm gonna go through some real world examples that we've seen in each of these, the automation, the process, and the chaos layers, and what these 5 elements of the workflow design look like for each of those. So chaos layer is probably the worst example because we don't want things in the chaos layer. We want as little as possible in the chaos layer. We might never be able to completely avoid it because things will happen that we weren't expecting. But I would say, I don't know if I would say most, but most or close to most organizations, everything is sitting in the chaos layer. There's not well-defined processes or workflows in place for the different things that we do in FinOps, whatever that is. And when I say well-defined, a lot of times organizations will have some idea of what needs to happen in certain cases, but it's not an official documented process, and so there is still some level of chaos potentially that can be introduced. So I have tons of examples of this. I'm sure you all have tons of examples of this as well. One recent one, there was an organization who was just building a FinOps practice. Just very, very beginning. And one of the first things when we started working with them was they saw their monthly bill, and it was about 20% higher than they would have expected based on what the past few months had been, and they had no idea why. And they didn't know who to talk to, they didn't know who to ask, they didn't know what might have caused it, and so they were kind of running around panicking to figure out what caused this, right? So in this example, thinking of the different elements, the trigger was their month-end invoice. That's a terrible trigger. We need to know well before we see the invoice at the end of the month. None of the other elements were in place. And so this is something that it was a lot of wasted money because there was no process. This is obviously something, with something as simple as an anomaly alert, this could have been found a lot sooner. So that's an example of the chaos layer. Now moving up to a step up from that, the process layer. So this is where it starts to get interesting. Now I'll say, I would love to dive really deep into any of this with you. I was hoping to be able to go deep into kind of the more technical elements of this. I only have 20 minutes. I only have 11 left. So I won't be able to, but feel free to come. I've got this one and then the next example that I think are really interesting ones. But we have a bunch of others as well. If you want to go deep into any of this, come find me after or reach out to me on LinkedIn. Happy to go deeper on any of this. But this was one where we were working with a FinOps team that worked with a bunch of different application teams, and we would meet with the individual application teams on a recurring basis, and every time we would review different things. One of the things we would review is optimization opportunities. Now, they had some developers that used very expensive EC2 instances, and they didn't have to run all the time. It was something that they only needed to be running when the developers were actually actively working on them. And so definitely at the end of the day, they should be turned off. They really, I don't think there's any reason they should ever be left on overnight. Every time we did these reviews with them though, there were a few of them, 6 to 10 of them, that were on and idle. And so every time we did the reviews, we said, hey, here's some idle instances, go turn them off, and they would. And that's great. But 2 months later, we would see the same ones that got turned off before back on. And then they'd turn them off again, and then a couple months later, they're back on. Every month, there was kind of a rotating list of these resources that would go idle and then get turned off and then go idle and then get turned off. And depending on how frequently we did those reviews and the timing of when they went idle, it ended up being tens of thousands of dollars of waste every month. The interesting thing, though, is they did get turned off. So the FinOps team sees that as success. They say, hey, we identified these idle instances, we turned them off, and they were calculating the savings, the ongoing, like maybe we say, hey, this one's $1,000 a month. We saw it was idle, we turned it off. We just saved the company $12,000 a year. Sure. But you did it a month after it went idle. The whole point of this is how do we get that down to a day? Because even just that decrease in gap is a lot of savings. The hard thing is, how do you report on that? It's not as, you get a lot more visibility when you're fixing things in the chaos layer than when you're fixing things through automation. No one really cares that you avoided an issue. That's not exciting. That doesn't get you a lot of praise. They care that something happened that should have been avoided and you went and fixed it. So just kind of interesting. But anyway, so in this case, what we did is really simple. It doesn't have to be complicated. You can start simple and move to more complicated. This one's a pretty simple one. So a CloudWatch alert, that will notify you. You can set alerts for different things, but in this case, it notifies you when the instance goes idle. It sends you one alert, though. So what we did is a little bit of a tweak on that, where we also had a piece of it that would check every 24 hours for any CloudWatch alarms that were in alarm state, and it would send a reminder. And we had tagging on those resources, so it would send it to the actual owner of that resource. And so, yeah, if the one reminder maybe works, they didn't have CloudWatch alarms at all anyway, so even that one probably works, but then it sends them a reminder every 24 hours, and so it just makes sure they get it turned off. After doing this, we went from, tens of thousands of waste every month in idle instances that still did get turned off eventually, to when we would do the reviews, there sometimes was one, but most of the time not a single idle instance sitting there. So very simple, but hard to quantify, but this has a huge impact on potential savings. All right, one more example in the automation. So this one, there was an organization that had, again, similar situation, over 1,000 engineers, a lot of GP2 instances in AWS. So for their EBS volumes, a lot of them were GP2. They wanted to move them to GP3 because it's typically cheaper. But they're working with over 1,000 engineers. And so they had made some progress, but it's hard to get 1,000 engineers to take action. Now, this was not the final solution. The final solution would be all the Terraform files are updated to say GP3 instead of GP2. But that's going to take time. So what we did in the meantime is, and this might not work for everyone, and that's fine, it's an example. I've shared this before and got a lot of pushback. These are examples. Different things might work at different organizations, but here, we ran a script that went weekly, and what it did is it found any GP2 instances and upgraded them to GP3. If they redeploy the code, it's gonna go back to GP2. Fine, it'll run another week later, and it'll put it back to GP3. It's not the final solution, but if you just think, let's say it takes 6 months to get all the Terraform code actually updated, think of all the savings that you'll get in those 6 months by just having that upgrade happening in between. Even if it gets put back to GP2, it's for a week at most. So yeah, a lot of savings there. That's an example of automation, right? At that point, there were things you could do to filter out, or you could say only do it for these, or do it for everything but these. But otherwise, it's fully automated. It doesn't take anyone actually going and making a change. It does it for you, and that can lead to significant savings. So again, those are some examples. Love to go through in detail, just can't do that right now. Would also love to share others if anyone wants to come chat with me later. But the other thing is these examples all have to do with cost optimization, but this is for more than just cost optimization. So anything that we do in FinOps, I won't go through all of these examples, but anything that we do in FinOps, we can think of workflows, processes, automation within those workflows and processes for those. I mean, even things as simple as In a previous role as a practitioner, forecasting was always a challenge. I was putting together the forecast, but I don't know. Again, we're working with hundreds of teams. They're all doing their own things. I'm not aware of anything. I rely a lot on everybody sharing information with me, but a lot of times they don't even know. So even with things like forecasting, I mean, you could do something where you've got a machine learning forecast that gets created automatically, sent to the different teams, and an email that says, this is the forecast that was created in this way. If this looks right to you, fine. If not, click this button to tell me that I need to talk, right? I mean, even simple things like that can help add some automation to some extent into the process, where I don't have to go manually reach out and follow up with all these hundreds of different teams. I can get what I need a little bit quicker. So there's a few more examples there. Tagging is another big one. I mean, even just preventing someone from being able to create a resource if it doesn't have tags would count here. Tag or terminate policy if you want to go extreme. There's a lot of different things that you can do. So I would do a poll, but I won't. I would be interested to know how many people are already doing anything like this, or if a lot of what you're doing is already manual, but I don't know if people want to raise their hand for something like that. So if it's something that you're not doing, which from my experience, it is more rare. It's more common that organizations aren't doing this type of stuff. So if you leave this and you want to start implementing some of this, I guess here's kind of my tips. So first is identifying what do we even start with? Because you don't want to do everything at once, like with everything in FinOps, crawl, walk, run. So let's find something, let's identify the issue that we want to start with. Think of things that are either have a high cost impact or things that get a lot of attention, where you hear complaints a lot, things that maybe issues that come up more frequently. Like, do you have a lot of random spikes? Do you have a lot of instances going idle? Do you have a lot of resources being created without tags? Find something that's a pain point, a common pain point. Don't just focus on cost, because if it takes you 6 months to implement it, it kind of goes against everything that I'm saying. Think of cost, but also think of speed. If it's something you can get done in a day, even if it only saves $1,000 a month, that's great. So yeah, some tips there on how to identify the issues, and then those five different elements that I talked about for designing the workflow. Go through those steps, document what those are. That gives you kind of the building blocks for your workflow, and then actually build out and design that workflow. So oversimplified again, I'd love to go more in detail, kind of high level for now, but come talk to me. Here are some common ones that we've seen or that we've done before, just as some ideas to I guess get you thinking if any of these apply to you, or if it gives you ideas for something similar you could do. These are kind of more focused on either if you're doing nothing, there's some here that you could do, or even if you've done just a little bit. As you get more advanced, it becomes so custom and different from company to company that don't have some good examples there. But I mean, something as simple as storage tiering policies is one of those. If you're in AWS and you've never used intelligent tiering, look into it. I mean, it's such a simple one, but I can't tell you, again, I work with a lot of customers. A lot of people know about intelligent tiering. A lot of people are not using it. And it's such a simple thing that gets a ton of savings when you do it. You don't even have to build it. AWS has done it for you. But it does fit within what we're talking about here. Commitment expiration, that is a perfect one for this, because so often a commitment expires and they go renew it, they go buy another one, but there's a month delay. And in that month, how much money did you lose? And then they're still gonna go to the executive and say, hey, we bought this commitment, we're saving this much money, but you missed a month of savings. And that's what we're trying to address here. So that's all. That's the quick overview here. Again, please come find me after, reach out to me on LinkedIn. We've got a booth. I'd love to go deeper on any of this stuff. Love to hear if any of you are already doing this. I'd love to learn more ideas from you. Or if you've got any challenges or questions and want to ask, I'd love to just strategize with you at Brainstorm. So
where can they find you again?
So we've got our booth in the expo.
Awesome.
This, I think, takes you to LinkedIn.
That takes you to feedback session, which you should all please do give our speakers feedback. It is the kindest gift you can give other than a Dairy Queen gift card. With that, please give a warm thank you to Parker.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, producer Andrew here. Thank you so much for watching and for your support. For more FinOps X 2025 content, go check out our YouTube channel. Like, subscribe, and leave comments and questions for all of our wonderful speakers. We appreciate your support.